Hello, everyone. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, April 25th. You are now watching Open, a program that brings the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. The FBI is warning Americans to avoid using free charging stations located in public areas like airports and shopping centers. Using these stations could leave consumers and their smartphones vulnerable to an act many are calling juice jacking. Joining me now to discuss these charging stations are how these charging stations are being used to spread malware is security privacy expert for Consumer Reports, Amira Dhalla. Amira, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I want to jump right into it. This is the first time that I'm hearing this term. Can you explain what juice jacking is?
Yeah, so juice jacking is commonly referred to the hacking into phones to steal data or infect them with malware. It can be done in a public setting where portable chargers are set and often made to look like real chargers. And what they do is they prey upon people who want to charge their phone, but often are in fact giving their data or their phone access to cyber criminals who are then infecting them or stealing their data from them.
Now, I'm curious to know, how are scammers using public charging stations to conduct this act? So, is it the actual entire port? Is it just the USB? Can you just explain, what that act is?
Yeah, this actually started in a demonstration at a conference a very long time ago where hackers demonstrated that this was possible. And what they did is they set up a USB port that was made to look synonymous with any other port that you would find in a public setting. And they set it up there, seeing if anyone would plug into it and use it. And so hackers are really leveraging that same type of mentality where they're in public settings where you're commonly seeing USB ports where you can plug in your phone and setting them up very, very similarly to that style. So people don't often think twice. They think that they're public and open and available like any other USB ports that they see in public.
Now, according to CNN, this issue dates back to 2011, which I was very shocked to hear because it's been a very long time. How has, this act evolved now that technology is more advanced?
Yeah, it's really important to mention that date because it has been around for a while. And although we are seeing news reports about it now, it's really important to mention that the actual act of juice jacking has not increased significantly in that time. It is quite intensive to set up and place in a way that can be done privately and securely for a hacker. So the reports that we're hearing right now are FBI tweets, specifically out of Denver, where they've suggested that it is possible, so we should be more secure. These tweets and the reports are not coming from a rise or widespread attacks that have been happening in this. So I really do want to just make sure that we note that there isn't an increase in the usage of juice jacking, but there is an increase in awareness that this is a possibility. And so over time, what we've seen in the past 10 plus years is that people have just become more reliant on their phones. So what hackers and cyber criminals are taking advantage of is that reliance on our phone, that as soon as it's dying, we head somewhere public where we can quickly charge it. Whether we are traveling more these days or relying on our phone for GPS or communication, we really need it charged so that we can continue on in our daily lives. So hackers are really taking advantage of this moment in time where we are vulnerable to potentially using something like a public charging station.
Now, I kind of want to add on to that. I remember seeing a story a while back that it was also kind of dangerous to buy like third-party chargers, especially like on Amazon or maybe at like random stores. Would you say that's kind of similar to what's happening right now?
Yeah, the most secure plugins you can get are directly from the device manufacturer. So Apple or Android, really make sure that their added security are in the USB plug specifically. So those are the best direct forms of charging that you can use, and I still recommend them to this day. But there are other options, and we know that people often in a clinch use other ones, and they can be more expensive. So we know that only certain people often have access to more than one or ones that they use for travel or otherwise.
Now, are these places that, host the public charging stations, are they aware of what's possibly happening when people are using their device?
So places, it's been common that this often can happen in very public settings. So recently, the recommendations have said watch out for airports, watch out for malls, coffee shops. These are the type of places where we are more commonly using our phones to plug in, to charge, because these are places we stop and can stay for a while. And so as much as I think these places are aware that this is happening and this can happen, because we don't have that widespread usage where people are being juice jacked, these places are not being held accountable, and they're not actually doing any preventative measures in these areas. As I said, it is harder for juice jacking to occur here because these are often more publicly surveilled areas. So if someone is setting up an infrastructure as big as a USB station, that is more often going to be caught on something like camera, and they can be traced back to the individuals. So it's less likely, and there's no actual actions taken by these spaces and public areas that are actually hosting what could be juice jacking.
Now, you mentioned that although it's like an act that is obviously, very bad, it isn't happening, although we're more aware about it, it's not happening as often. Would you say that makes it a little bit harder for people like yourself who are trying to study or follow this and see what's happening?
Yeah, it can make it much harder. And also, if it occurs, it's also hard to understand where it occurred at. And so that's one of the misconceptions that we're really trying to understand is if your phone gets infected by malware at the point in which you realize, you might not realize it was the public airport or coffee shop that you plugged into. At that point, you might not know where it is. So we're not able to necessarily trace it back at this exact moment. But there are other forms of malicious attacks that happen every day, more commonplace. And I think about phishing emails, I think about other areas. So if we're looking at in a cybersecurity threat landscape of where people are most vulnerable, oftentimes I will look at other places where we are able to trace it back, where we do have a lot more infections happening every single day in many types of ways. And we really focus our concern and our actual attention there.
Now, I'm curious to know, let's say you are a victim of this juice jacking. What type of information could be taken from your phone with this malware?
So anything can be taken from your phone is the short answer. If someone is taking your data, they're probably looking for private, personalized information. That can be as easy as getting on your email. They can use your GPS, your social media accounts. They can actually get into any sort of account and app that you have on your mobile device. If they're using malware, they might actually be doing things like taking advantage of your phone to make a double copy of all the data on your account. They might be doing things like putting spyware on your phone. In some cases, they might even be putting ransomware on your phone and locking your phone down, in which case they might be asking for a fee to unlock your phone so that you have access to get back in.
Wow, that sounds very scary. And I've heard so many stories online of people saying they're getting calls that it looks like it's from them and it's from other people. Is that a result of juice jacking, or is that just another, form of, I guess, your phone kind of being hacked?
There is a very common scam right now where you're getting calls that are focused from numbers you might know from relatives, from family members, or just even ones in your area code that look like they might be something that you might want to pick up. That is an entirely different scam, although I will say when it comes to juice jacking and malware, there are signs that your phone could be infected, and having calls or numbers or emails that go out from your phone that you're not doing could be a use case of juice jacking.
Now, I want to talk about, as you mentioned, we use our phones for everything. We heavily rely on our phones. So that means that we have Apple Pay, Google Pay, saved passwords, everything on our phone. Because this is happening, do you think people should maybe refrain from, relying on our phone for, sensitive things like our bank accounts and stuff like that?
Apple and Google have been doing a lot of work to really combat things like juice jacking. And so they've been adding extra security functions where you can do security checkups and more. So I actually think they're trying to take more preventative measures to actually make sure your phone is more secure from all the things that can be added onto it. I know that your phone is often your bank account, it's your credit card, it's your pass into the train. Right. It can be many things. And so or even your shopping card, whatever it could be. My advice would actually be not to stop using these features, but instead use them safely. Make sure that these accounts are backed up on other devices and you have access to them elsewhere. They're using multi-factor authentication. We actually recommend that passkey is the best form of defense in this case. Using safe and good passwords, often password managers are really good. And making sure that you're aware if anyone else has information or access to these accounts is really helpful.
You know, that now that you mentioned that, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, like on the Notes app, you have like every single password you ever own, you know, so it's like everything is on our cell phone. Now, because of this, if you are a victim of this, I could only imagine. I know that like when I feel like my email has been compromised, I'm like so scared and I'm like, what do I do? What should you do if you realize, or if you feel like, you know, my phone has been compromised? What should someone do in that event?
Well, to start, there's like some signs that you might not be aware you have malware that you should be consider. So security vulnerabilities can happen with and without juice jacking. And you should know that if your phone is doing funny things, so slow down, crashes, overheating, if it has pop-ups or ads or drained battery, or if it's sending emails to people without you actually doing it, these are all signs that you might have malware on your phone. And it can also happen by downloading malicious downloads or clicking on malicious links. And so there are many signs that can come from juice jacking or without juice jacking. So scanning your phone and at least keeping attention to what is happening is like the first step. But if you have been impacted, there are many other steps you can take. I would say the first one is to not make any purchases online or using any of the accounts to start. Make sure your device has the latest software updates. In some cases, you might actually want to restart your device to factory settings. You might want to delete some apps or histories or texts. And on a separate device, you might probably want to change your passwords and account measures for these accounts. As well as on iPhone and Android devices, there are different actions you can take. On Android, you can do a scan of it in the background in the security settings. And on iPhone, you can do a similar security checkup. But there's also apps that you can do that can support you, such as iVerify, that can do scanning for you in the background. So if you do think you have malware, or if you do have it on your phone, there are all these things you can do to get rid of it, to make sure that you are stopping it in its trail and protecting your accounts and your device as a whole and your data. But the last thing I'll probably say is that if you do reporting it to the FTC, they have a great site at reportfraud.ftc.gov that you can use to report it, because this is helpful for them to monitor where scams and malicious attacks are happening, so that we can alert the public and make sure that people are getting the right advice that they need in the instances this might occur to them.
All right. Well, Amira, thank you so much for joining us and having this discussion.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
To stay up to date with all the work Consumer Reports does, please go to their website at www.consumerreports.org, or you can follow them on social media at Consumer Reports. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.